Hello, this is Yashvin. In this video, I'll be solving paper 4, variant 1, October-November 2021, IGCSE Biology. Question 1a. Fish, mammals, and birds are all groups of vertebrates. 1. State the names of the two other main groups of vertebrates. Those are reptiles and amphibians. 2. Complete table 1.1 to compare the features of fish, mammals, and birds. So the organ involved in gas exchange system is gills in fish and lungs in mammals. Here we are talking about the organ, so it's lungs, and not the gas exchange surface area, which would have been alveoli. Circulatory system is a single circulatory system in fish and double in mammals. Double because the blood passes twice through the heart in one complete circulation. The body of fish is covered in scales and that of birds is covered in feathers. Only mammals have external ears, whereas fish and birds do not. B. Figure 1.1 is a micrograph of part of some fish gills. Fish gills are adapted for gas exchange by diffusion. 1. Define the term diffusion. So diffusion is the net movement of particles from an area of their higher concentration to an area of their lower concentration or down their concentration gradient as a result of their random movement. 2. Suggest one adaptation visible in figure 1.1 that shows that fish gills are efficient structures for gas exchange diffusion. So gas exchange diffusion would occur at the surface of the gills, and as you can see over here, the surface area to volume ratio of gills is quite large, and so this will increase the rate of diffusion of gases, which makes it very efficient at gas exchange by diffusion. C. Some pollutants decrease the concentration of dissolved oxygen in rivers. This can result in the death of fish. 1. State one type of pollutant that can result in a decrease in the concentration of dissolved oxygen in rivers. One of those could be fertilizers. 2. Researchers investigated the effect of the concentration of dissolved oxygen in water on gas diffusion distance in tissues. The thickness of fish gills was used to determine the gas diffusion distance. So in other words, these researchers are investigating how changing the concentration of dissolved oxygen in water changes with the thickness of fish gills. The researchers changed the concentration of dissolved oxygen by bubbling different concentrations of oxygen into water. The temperature of water was kept constant at 15 degrees Celsius. So as you can see as results in this figure, as the concentration of dissolved oxygen is increasing, the distance of gas diffusion or the thickness of the gills in fish is going to increase. Figure 1.3 shows the relationship between the concentration of dissolved oxygen and water temperature. And in this figure, we can see that as temperature is increasing, the dissolved oxygen concentration is decreasing. Complete steps 1 to 3 to determine the effect on gas diffusion distance of increasing temperature of water from 15 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius. In step 1, you're supposed to find the concentration of dissolved oxygen from figure at 15 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius. So as you can see, the concentration at 15 degrees Celsius is 8.9 and the concentration at 25 degrees Celsius is 7.3. Step 2, use the values from step 1 to find the gas diffusion distances from figure 1.2. So now that you've got the concentration of dissolved oxygen, you're going to find out the corresponding values of gas diffusion distance. So here we've got 7.3 milligram per tm cube of oxygen, which comes out at 1.95 micrometers of gas diffusion distance, and 8.9 milligram per dm cube of dissolved oxygen gives 2.35 micrometers of gas diffusion distance. So you've got 2.35 for 15 degrees Celsius and 1.95 for 25 degrees Celsius, and the difference between the two values would be 2.35 minus 1.95, which is 0.4 micrometers. Two tomato plants that produce red fruit were bred together. This cross produced 71 offspring plants with red fruit and 26 offspring plants with yellow fruit. So as you can see, the majority of the fruit are red, meaning that the allele that causes red fruit is dominant and the allele that causes yellow fruit is recessive. Complete the genetic diagram to show this cross. Select a suitable letter to represent the alleles and decide which allele will need a capital letter and which will need a lowercase letter. So I'll be using R for representing the allele for fruit color and capital R to represent red color, since most of the offsprings are red in color, meaning that this allele is dominant. And small r for yellow fruit. Parental phenotypes are both red, but as you can see, some of the offsprings have the recessive phenotypes, and for some of the offsprings to have the recessive phenotypes means that both of the parents have to be heterozygous, so they have to have both of the alleles, and the gametes would be produced from each of the alleles of the parents. Alright, to determine the offspring genotypes, I like to draw this Punnett square using the gametes of the two parents. So here you've got one parent, the other parent. You cross each of the gametes with each other, and so this would be the result. And you've got three different genotypes, two heterozygotes and two homozygotes of different genotypes. What is the expected ratio of phenotypes? As you can see, there are going to be three different genotypes with the capital R or the dominant allele. So there are going to be 3 red fruit and 1 yellow fruit. B. Researchers carried out some experiments on tomato fruit that were heterozygous for fruit color. State how the researchers could be sure that the fruit came from homozygous plants. They could do this by carrying out a test cross where the plant from the experiment or the plant whose genotype that they want to determine is going to be crossed with another plant, and the offspring of the phenotype is then observed to eventually conclude the genotype of the parent plant. See, the researchers analyzed two pigments, chlorophyll and lycopene or lysopene, in homozygous red tomato fruit and homozygous yellow tomato fruit. Chlorophyll is found in unripe tomato fruit. 1. Describe the function of chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is the photosynthetic pigment which is used to convert light energy from the sunlight into chemical energy during the process of photosynthesis to make carbohydrates. 2. State the name of one mineral required for the synthesis of chlorophyll. That would be magnesium. 3. The researchers analyzed the concentration of pigments in tomato fruits before they were ready to eat or unripe, and during the second stage when they were ready to eat or when they were ripe. The results of the analysis are shown in table 2.1. Use information in table 2.1 to compare the changes in pigments in red fruit and yellow fruit as they ripen. This question is of 3 marks. Here you need to write about the similarities and the differences between the two pigments and the two colored fruits, and you will need to use the data given in the table as the question is asking you to use the information. Here is my answer. I've stated how the chlorophyll concentration decreases in both colored fruits as they ripen. So as you can see over here, this is the column for chlorophyll, and the concentration of chlorophyll is going to decrease from unripe to ripe fruit in both red and yellow. And I've quoted the data for the red fruit. So it's going to decrease from 10 milligram per gram of fruit to 1.2 milligram per gram as the fruit ripens. You could also have quoted the data for yellow fruit. And I've also quoted the data for concentration of lycopene. So it is going to increase in both red fruit and the yellow fruit as the fruit ripen. Again, I've quoted the data for red fruit. You could do that for yellow fruit as well. A gene is responsible for the production of lycopene in fruits. Geneticists have recently produced genetically modified pink pineapples using the gene associated with the production of lycopene. When genes are found at specific locations on an important biological molecule, say the name of this biological molecule. DNA has the genes. To describe the disadvantages of genetically modifying crops, well, some of the disadvantages include the fact that these crops can have adverse effects on human health, and another disadvantage is that the pollen of these modified crops can contaminate nearby crops that are marketed as organic, and so those will be contaminated. Those will not remain organic, which the consumer will believe that they are. Some washing powders contain enzymes. Figure 3.1 shows a box of biological washing powder containing enzymes. 1. Eggs contain protein. Describe how biological washing powder removes egg stains. So biological washing powder will have enzymes as mentioned here in the ingredients. These enzymes will include protease enzymes that carry out chemical digestion of proteins and convert them to amino acids. And as a result of this conversion, the protein from egg stains will be broken down. To explain why the manufacturer states that the washing powder works best at 30 degrees Celsius and should not be used above 50 degrees Celsius. So once again, the washing powder has enzymes, and the enzymes in this washing powder have an active site which is going to be complementary in shape to the substrate. And by binding onto the substrate using the active site, the enzymes are going to function. And it is a fact that enzymes work best at their optimum temperature, which would be 30 degrees Celsius. At a high temperature like 50 degrees Celsius, the enzymes would get denatured. As the shape of active site will change, the enzymes will not be able to form enzyme substrate complex with the substrate, and the substrate will not be broken down, the enzymes will not function, and that will be the answer. Scientists use enzymes and bile in the early development of washing powders. Outline the roles of bile in the body. So bile is a fluid which is made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder, from where it reaches the small intestine. And in here, it is going to break down larger molecules of fats into smaller bits, which is emulsification, and this will increase the surface area of fat, allowing faster digestion of fats into fatty acids and glycerol. So this breakdown of fats into fatty acids and glycerol is catalyzed by lipase enzymes. Bile can also neutralize the stomach acids to increase the pH for enzymes in intestines to function. Cholera is a transmissible disease. State the name of the type of pathogen that causes the disease cholera. So here you're supposed to name the type of pathogen and not the pathogen itself. So this is a bacteria. A study was designed to test the effectiveness of a cholera vaccine in an area where outbreaks of cholera occur frequently. The doctors gave some people in this area the new vaccine. One suggests what the cholera vaccine must contain to be effective. It needs to have the dead pathogen, the same pathogen against which the vaccine is being made. To explain why the people were not protected from cholera immediately after receiving the vaccine. Alright, the way that vaccine provides protection is by causing an immune response which will produce memory cells, and it is these memory cells which will kill the pathogen when it enters the body second time. But this protection is only available after immune response has been carried out. So for the protection to be available as a result of vaccine, immune response is carried out, when the immune system detects the pathogens. In the case of vaccine, and lymphocytes will secrete antibodies that lead to the death of pathogens. Then some lymphocytes will form memory cells that provide long-term immunity. 3. The doctors ensured that the people who received the new vaccine had not had cholera before. Suggest why. And this is because they want to ensure that the people do not have active immunity against cholera prior to receiving the vaccine. Now, if these people had already suffered from cholera, their immune response carried out by the immune system will have produced memory cells already. They will be immune to cholera, and the whole point of vaccine is to provide immunity to vulnerable people and not to those who have already developed immunity or who are already protected against the disease. 4. There was an outbreak of cholera in the area 2 months after the new vaccine was given. The people who had symptoms of cholera were monitored in hospital for 2 days. Some of the infected people had received the new vaccine and the others had not received the vaccine, and the results are shown in this figure. Using the information in figure 4.1, discuss how effective the vaccine was at preventing the symptoms of cholera. So in this figure, we can see that the shaded or the darker bars represent the vaccinated people. The percentage of vaccinated people who have the pathogen in their feces is lower compared to non-vaccinated people. Similarly, the percentage of vaccinated people who have diarrhea is lower than the non-vaccinated people, and vaccinated people do not have high body temperatures. Here you will compare the symptoms of the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated people and write the answer. Here's my answer, where I have compared the percentages of people in the two groups, and using the data will ensure that I score at least 1 mark. And I've also stated how the vaccinated people did not have high body temperature. Explain how cholera causes diarrhea. The cholera bacterium releases a toxin which leads to the secretion of chloride ions into the lumen of small intestine. As the concentration of chloride ions in the lumen increases, the water potential of the lumen decreases, and water moves by osmosis into the lumen of the small intestine. This excess water is lost in the feces and causes dehydration. To describe how diarrhea is treated, diarrhea can be treated using oral rehydration therapy by drinking sugar and salt dissolved in water. 5. The circulatory system is comprised of the heart, blood vessels, and the blood. Explain how the structures of the heart ensure that blood flows in one direction. Include the names of these structures in your answer. So the valves in the heart prevent backflow of blood into the atria or ventricles, and in turn backflow into the arteries and the veins. Semilunar valves close when the atria contract. This prevents the blood flow into the arteries, and at this time the atrioventricular valves are open. When semilunar valves open up, the atrioventricular valves close down, and this happens when the ventricles contract, and this will prevent blood flow into the atria. B. Figure 5.1 shows a diagram of some blood vessels associated with the skin. Table 5.1 shows the functions of some blood vessels. Complete Table 5.1 by naming the type of blood vessel and stating the letter of the type of blood vessel from Figure 5.1. So the blood vessel that regulates blood flow by constricting and dilating is arteriole, and the vessel that collects blood from a network of narrowest blood vessels. So the vessel that collects blood from the capillaries is venule, and arterioles supply this blood to the capillaries. With the blood vessel which withstands the highest blood pressure is artery. The vessel which allows the transfer of substances to and from tissue fluid is capillary, since fluid leaks out of the capillaries to form tissue fluid. Transports blood toward the heart is vein, and the vessel which redirects blood flow deeper under the skin is shunt vessel. And here I have written down the letters on the figure. C. State the name of the blood vessels that deliver blood to the kidneys. That would be renal artery. and the blood vessels which supply blood to the heart muscle would be coronary arteries. D. Describe how blockages in the vessels that deliver blood to the heart muscle can be treated. So the blood vessels that deliver blood to the heart muscle are coronary arteries, and blockages in coronary arteries means coronary heart disease. So in this answer, you're supposed to describe the treatment of coronary heart disease. One treatment is the blocked artery can be replaced by another blood vessel in coronary bypass operation, or a mesh tube can be inserted into the artery to keep it open. The third solution is a balloon can be inserted into the collapsed artery, which is inflated using water. As the artery opens up, the balloon can be removed, and this is angioplasty. Question 6. Many crop plants are grown as monocultures. Figure 6.1 shows the destruction of a monoculture of maize as a result of drought. A. Describe the negative impacts to an ecosystem of large-scale monocultures, such as the one shown in Figure 6.1. Monoculture in crops would mean growing many of the same plant species in one field area. This will reduce the nutrients in the soil of that area. As a result, the soil in that area does not remain fertile any longer, because the variety of bacteria and the microorganisms needed for fertility have decreased. And this impacts the ecosystem by causing loss of biodiversity, habitat destruction, damaging the food webs, as well as causing infertility of the soil. B. The fruits of maize are produced on structures called cobs. Each cob has many fruits. Figure 6.2 shows how the maize cobs have changed over thousands of years as a result of selective breeding. State 2 desirable features visible in Figure 6.2 that have been selected from the more ancient varieties of maize. So as you can see, as time is passing, the size of the cob on which the fruit grows is increasing, as well as the number of fruits on each cobs, because earlier the shaded region or the darker regions could mean that the fruit are not present in particular spots of the cob. C. The process of selective breeding involves a series of steps as shown in Figure 6.3. Seeds select two plants with desirable features, transfer pollen from the flower of one plant to a flower on the second plant, use bags to cover the flowers that are pollinated, and then collect the seeds, germinate them, wait for the plants to grow. Select the plants from step 4 that have the desirable features, and then continue steps 2 to 5 for many generations. 1. Explain why the flowers are covered with bags in step 3. This will prevent pollination of the plant that has already been pollinated, as it will prevent pollen of a plant with undesirable features from landing on the plant. To explain why seeds in step 4 need oxygen to germinate. So for the seed to germinate, they would need oxygen for aerobic respiration, which will provide energy, and this energy will be used by the plant to grow. 3. Explain why some of the plants in step 5 may show features not visible in parent plant. Of the genes in the plants are inherited by the parents, and if a certain characteristic of offsprings is not visible in the parents, that means the parents could have been heterozygous, and the feature which is now present or visible in the offsprings is caused by a recessive allele. So recessive alleles have combined from both of the heterozygous parents and resulted in this homozygous offspring plant, which carries both recessive alleles. 4. Suggest why selective breeding should continue for many generations in step 6. And so many repetitions of selective breeding will ensure that all of the plants become homozygous for the alleles that cause the desired trait, and this will reduce variation in the crops. 5. State how new features which did not exist in ancient varieties of crop plant could appear. So appearance of a new feature is a result of mutation. And that is it. We are done with this paper. Thank you for watching.